Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Senior Living Today. Today, we have a special episode for our listeners. We've been collecting questions from you all season long, and today we are here to answer them. So to answer your questions, we've brought together a panel of experts in the senior living industry, and I'm very pleased to introduce Samantha Lloyd, the director for the Ohio Masonic Communities Resource Center, Melissa Todd, corporate sales manager for the Ohio Masonic Communities, and Michelle Whitaker, Member Experience Director for Western Reserve Masonic Community. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us back. It's always a fun time.
Absolutely. So our questions for today are in no specific order, and our panel is going to be answering the ones that fit their specific skill set the best. So Michelle, we're going to actually kick it off with a life enrichment question for you. We had a listener write in asking how they would suggest a new activity or event to be added to the calendar. So can you walk them through that process and how that works?
Oh, I love that question. So at Western Reserve, we have an events and outings committee. It's made up of about 10 of our community members. I meet with them regularly. They come with suggestions that they've received from other members, along with some of their own suggestions for restaurants, day trips, plays, theaters, things that they want to do. I take those suggestions and I basically make it happen. Everything on the calendar is suggestions that they've given me.
I think that's really special that all of the events and activities are made up from what our residents would like to be doing. So let's talk a little bit about dining. Another question was, can I offer a recipe to the dining room manager?
I have a great recent story about that. So one of our members was having dinner in our dining room with her husband, and our dining services manager was walking around talking to everybody. He asked her how her dinner was. She said, "I don't like sweet potatoes." He said, "Neither do I." So she shared with him that she found this recipe for vanilla sweet potatoes and she loves it. He asked for the recipe, so she gave it to him along with her apricot chicken recipe. 2 weeks later, it was on the menu. Our chef loves to get recipes and try new things.
Oh my gosh, stop it. That actually sounds really good.
Yeah, it sounds delicious. I want that recipe.
Yeah.
And you said vanilla sweet potatoes?
Vanilla sweet potatoes.
What a twist on a fall classic.
All right. So Samantha, we actually also had quite a few questions come in regarding the Resource Center. And one of the most common questions we received was, what is the Resource Center and what services does the Resource Center offer? So can you give a little bit of insight to our listeners on what your team does?
Absolutely. So the Resource Center is the one-call way to receive information and support. We help with clinical, financial, and social needs. And our focus is really helping those we serve to receive the resources they need in the best location, whether that be on one of our campuses, in their own home, or elsewhere. We make referrals, we coordinate services, we do well checks, and so much more. Really, we are here to meet each individual's unique need, whatever that may be. And we have coordinators that are located across the state.
And then I think another question we had come in that kind of goes along with this is, who is eligible to receive help from the Resource Center?
Anyone can receive services from the Resource Center. You do not have to have a Masonic affiliation to receive information or receive support.
It's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Samantha.
Yes. And one additional thing is we do also make referrals for those that need help getting connected to benefits. And you do have to have a Masonic affiliation to receive financial support from us, but certainly there are a lot of community organizations out there. So if someone does not have a Masonic affiliation, then we can still help connect them to other benefits and services that are available.
That's wonderful. And for our listeners, just so you know, we will be putting the contact information for the Resource Center in the description for this episode, so that if you do need to connect with the Resource Center, you need services from them, you'll be able to contact them. All right, Melissa, the next one is for you. This listener wrote in, I am looking for the best location to move my mother, and I keep hearing the acronym CCRC. What does that mean? And is that a good option to consider?
Yes, we do use the acronym CCRC quite a bit. and in any healthcare or medical entity. We love our acronyms. So it's something that's thrown out quite a bit, but we do need to break it down for a lot of families just so they know exactly what they're looking for. And if they've found that, if what we're calling a CCRC is identifiable in their location or the territory that they're focused on searching. So a CCRC is a continuing care retirement community. So I usually break it down in two parts for families. Continuing care, CC, that means the constant ability to move from independent living through an assisted living level of care, maybe siloed by a memory care assisted living. But the most important part of that continuing care is the fact that there is some type of short-term rehab or long-term care, also considered a nursing home entity, at the campus or location that you're looking at. So having all of those components makes up a true continuing care. And then the retirement community comes with everything that we do every day for a senior on our campus that is 55 years or older. So as long as you fall within 55 to 105, maybe even greater than that, we're supporting the seniors in our area in a continuing basis.
Well, I think you made a great point there, too, that continuing care retirement communities are a wonderful option, but they are also location based. So if somebody is looking in an area where a CCRC might not exist, that's something to keep in mind, that they are not everywhere. For the Ohio Masonic communities, we do have 2 CCRCs. We have one in Springfield, Ohio, and one in Medina, Ohio, for those listening, if you are in those areas or interested in moving to one of those communities. Melissa, I think another thing that you hear often and that we got questions about is pets. Do we accept pets, and what kind of pets are acceptable? We had some listeners write in asking about snakes and lizards, if we accept any exotic pets. So can you break down our pet policy, what we take, how many they can have, all the ins and outs?
Yeah, kind of the whole gamut around pets, because a lot of individuals at any age have furry friends, or, as you may have mentioned, exotic reptile friends. But the simple answer is yes. Our campuses do allow pets. We most often see cats and dogs. So there is a 2-pet maximum in most of our standard size apartments. Some of our campuses do have very large garden ranch villas, very unique floor plans that are very large square footage. I'm talking over 1,500 square feet. So there have been exceptions for those larger floor plans to allow more than 2 pets. But ideally, as an encompassed answer, it's a 2-pet maximum. And then occasionally we'll have a unique situation where there's, 2 cats and a small dog in a large apartment that we're able to talk about and just make sure that it's an appropriate environment, safe for everyone, not only the resident, but the animals and then their neighbors. As far as exotic pets go, I have yet to have an individual or family tell me they have a boa constrictor or a reptile. But I think we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. And we do have some folks who, double check with us and say, I have a 20-gallon fish tank. I love, this type of fish. And I've always, been fascinated by aquatic life. Is that acceptable? So yes, we can have fish and aquariums. We've had a few folks in the past with birds. So that's another type of pet that we have accepted in the past. But everything pet-wise, from, a cat or a dog, does have a conversation about having a one-time pet fee. And that goes for all 3 of our Ohio Masonic communities. But I always rest assured to the family that it's one time. You're not paying like an annual premium every month to have your pet live with you. It's one time right when you move in. And we collect that pet deposit, upon entry of your furry friend. So that's kind of, what we hear a lot with families concerned that they would have to depart with a furry friend if they chose to move into a senior living community. And that is just not the case with us.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for clarifying all of the ins and outs of our pet policy for our listeners. Now we're going to talk a little bit about transportation. Another listener question we had come in asked about how transportation works at our communities. How do they sign up and where can they go with the community transportation that we offer?
I guess I'll take that one. We offer transportation for independent living and assisted living on our campus. We do a Bueller shopping trip once a week, and we also offer a city loop where they can sign up and let us know what store they'd like to go to, and the bus will loop around Medina, dropping off, picking them up where they need to go. It works out really well. When it comes to doctor's appointments, things that are more scheduled, our transportation team handles that. A community member can call in and say they need to see a podiatrist to give them the doctor's name. Our transportation team will even schedule that for them and, pick them up, drop them off to their appointment. And that works out really good.
I think that's such a great service that we offer as well. Not all senior living communities do offer transportation. So for those of you who are out there looking, just keep that in mind. It's something to consider, something to ask questions about when you're touring communities.
And I think Michelle said something too, like, our transportation team takes that next step, because a lot of times the community member is like, I have an appointment this day at this time, but our transportation team has, taken it upon themselves to say, hey, maybe we can't, figure out that exact time, but why don't you let us call the doctor and find a time that works for both of them? And that takes the resident out of feeling like the middle person, because we know if the transportation team is scheduling it, we know it's an appointment that we can fulfill for that resident. So I've never seen it go two ways. And that's just so unique to the Ohio Masonic communities.
So Melissa, I think you can help us out with the next question. But somebody wrote in recently, I have heard some of my friends mention the word waiver when looking at places for their parents to move. What is Medicaid waiver? And is that something that any of our communities offer?
Yes, it is a hot topic right now, and for good reason. That is because the Medicaid Waiver program was recently rolled out at the Browning Masonic community in Waterville, Ohio. So Medicaid Waiver is a state and federally funded program. It is something that not all communities offer. You have to apply to receive this service and receive this state and federal funded program. So someone that, would be eligible for a Medicaid waiver at our Browning campus would be an individual that has a 2-year private pay spend down. So that means, they can afford to pay their monthly rent on our campus for 24 months. And after that 24-month period, we would work with Job and Family Services and the local area aging office to submit their application to become a waiver eligible individual. And what that does is it takes their spend down that they have just completed over the last 2 years, and it asks, what is your monthly reliable income? Is that a Social Security or pension? Most common is. And, how can we make continuing to live at Browning Masonic Community affordable for you based on your reliable monthly income? So there is a lot of paperwork, but there is also a lot of support that our team, provides in tandem with the Resource Center if there's connections and services that are needed to obtain some of the documents for the application. But we are so happy to, be able to receive the stamp of approval to offer Medicaid waiver, because it really does hold you to a higher standard and a higher quality of care. And that's why in the Waterville area, there are very few places that offer Medicaid waivers. So we are celebrating the fact that Browning has completed their application and even moved in their first Medicaid waiver eligible individual. So success is on its way.
Well, thank you for sharing all the information on that. And so our listeners know we do have an FAQ page on our website about waivers. So we'll go ahead and link to that in the description as well. And if you have any additional questions, you can always call the Ohio Masonic Communities. Melissa would be happy to walk you through any additional questions you have. And then we have Julie, who is our sales manager at Browning, which Melissa mentioned is where we accept Medicaid waiver currently, and she'd be willing to help you as well. All right, the next question that we have is a little bit of a tough one, but how do I know when is the right time to move my mother to memory care? It's so hard to know what's best. And I know this is something that a lot of our adult children struggle with. How do we know when that right time is? And Melissa, I'm sure you have this conversation with a lot of the adult children that you work with. So do you have an answer that you can help this listener out with?
I do. And yes, it sounds definitely written by a loving family member, because we hear it a lot. How do I know it's time? Because there's going to be no obvious billboard as you're driving down the street that says it's time to move. Consider memory care over an assisted living or an independent living option. So I would, share with our listeners that it's a combination of red flags, right? It's not one definitive, day in the life of your loved one, but it's a combination. We always talk about with our families safety concerns, and that can look different for everyone. It's not just a focus on wandering or exit seeking their home. It could be, more frequently getting lost, while driving to very common places in your loved one's life, grocery store, bank, church. It could be time and place orientation becoming more troublesome. Right before we moved my grandmother into a memory care, we noticed that she was, arriving to church in the evening instead of in the morning for Mass. And once that became a more redundant commonality, we've really started to seek expert and professional opinion to communicate some of those changes. And that's when we kind of dug a little bit deeper. So notice some of the behavior changes. Is there increased confusion, increased agitation, or increased fear? Those are some of the things we look at. It could also be increased friendliness. If your loved one was always a very private individual and now they're opening the door for anyone who rings, that's a safety concern and a behavior change that's specific to their personality. And it's no longer the person you once knew. So we definitely take those factors into consideration, but also we look at caregiver stress. So if you, the daughter, son, niece, nephew, are feeling an overwhelmed sense of frustration because you're having more caregiver stress, that's an important factor to consider. It's not just about your loved one's safety or the increasing care needs that you're seeing, but you're now being impacted by the increase and the changes in your loved one. So you've got to weigh that heavily on the conversation table as well. But I really say safety concerns, behavior changes, and the frequency of those will help guide you to knowing it's the right time. Because overall, prioritizing safety and well-being, along with your own, is going to be the moment that you reach out to the Ohio Masonic Communities, and we can better help you with some deeper discussions to talk about the pain points that are becoming more prominent day to day. But you got to just, reach out a little bit before that crisis moment. And start talking about some interventions that can be taken before there's a hospitalization or crisis.
Absolutely. And that's great advice, Melissa. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
So Sam, we have another question for you. This listener was wondering if the Resource Center helps people anywhere in Ohio because they don't actually live near one of our communities.
Absolutely. We do. And you don't have to live near one of our communities to receive services and support through the Resource Center. We have an 877 number that anyone can call no matter where they're located. And we have coordinators that are located across the state. So wherever you are, wherever your primary residence is, you can call in. We'll connect you with your local coordinator and they are familiar with all the resources in your area. They can even come out and do a home visit and sit down with you and just talk about what it is that you're needing. And so absolutely, you do not have to be close to one of our campuses to call.
Wonderful. So Melissa, we had another question come in regarding the rental model that we offer, but that they were actually talking with a friend who told them about entrance fees at a community they were looking at. So they were wondering if we could explain the difference between these two models.
Yeah, we hear a lot of different families, because they're doing their research, and I promote that. I condone it, go out, get all the information, but identify, what type of financial model each community, is presenting to you, because entry fees are something that we don't do. We actually give the option to do if someone's comfortable with it, because everything around financials and money is going to be a comfort zone conversation. So an entry fee community, plain and simple, if someone participates in the entry fee model, it's saying you are giving a lump sum, typically large amount of 6 figures or more up front to that community, and then in addition paying a smaller monthly rent amount. So it could be saying, our entry fee is $200,000 and each month your rent is $4,000. Where at the Ohio Masonic communities, we don't make the entry fee mandatory. Someone can ask us about it, but we are just looking for a month-to-month rental. Pay your rent. It's due, the first week of every month. It includes everything. It's all inclusive. And that's how we've decided to handle things, because it can be very sensitive and overwhelming, for a family to say, why am I giving you $200,000? What is the benefit of that? And if the community you're looking at doesn't have a good explanation for that, that's where I err on the side of caution. So I usually ask families, what is your preference? What are you comfortable with? And is it something you want to talk about? And if not, we go forward with our normal brochure and our normal month-to-month rental options. And that's how we take that situation.
All right, Michelle, our next question is for you. This listener wrote in, it sounds like you have an abundance of activities on the calendar each month. Is this the case at all senior living communities? And do all communities have a life enrichment team and programming?
I would believe that all communities have calendars and a life enrichment team member in place. I would say if you're looking at a community, that would be something you should look at. Like, what activities are going on? What's on that calendar? Is this going to meet the needs of mom where she's at this stage in her life? I think what sets us apart a little bit is our life enrichment team is in all care areas, and our calendars are appropriate for those areas, to best meet the needs of that member. So if you're in independent living, obviously my calendar is going to look a little different than what the calendar looks like in memory care. So those are definitely things that you should look at and make sure those things are being offered. And don't forget, we allow our members to make suggestions, and families can also make suggestions too.
All right. So we had somebody write in asking about understanding pricing for different care levels and if any of those care levels are covered by insurance.
Ooh, I think that one's for me, isn't it, Alexandria?
I think so, Melissa.
Okay. Yep. We'll continue on with the pricing conversation. So, pricing does depend on what care area you are looking at. So independent living has a different offering and package and cost than memory care, and assisted living has a different cost, services, and quality of customizable care than independent living. So we've got to start with identifying what care level your loved one is going to be best served in. Is it independent living, or is it assisted living, or something else? After we've identified that, we kind of go off of the abundance of floor plans that we offer, right? So a 1-bedroom is going to cost less than a 2-bedroom and 2-bathroom apartment would. So then there's that level of conversation. What's the most appropriate floor plan for your loved one? And is that within the budget that they were hoping for? And then the third thing I kind of do is we go over what's included in that care level, in that floor plan, and figure out if there's any additional things that are going to be needed. The insurance conversation comes in a few different ways. Your loved one is always going to use their insurance cards when they go to the doctor's appointments that they have on their schedule. It's always going to come into play when they go to the pharmacy on Michelle's City Loop to pick up their prescriptions. So, your insurance is important to the normal things that you're used to using it for. However, when we have someone have a hospitalization and they come back home to us, we do know that that is a trigger for your insurance to potentially get some additional covered therapy services. And that's where I think the three of us here have worked together a lot on to get, physical therapy or occupational therapy into someone's home environment on our campus. And we do use their insurance cards to do that, because if there are covered services, we're always going to go that route first. And that's going to be specific to whatever insurance you have chosen. And then the third and last kind of entity where we get into insurance is if someone does a true short-term rehab stay on one of our CCRC continuing care campuses. So they have had some type of health ailment. They most likely had a hospitalization. They are not ready to go back to their home, villa, apartment, or original setting, and they need to do a short-term rehabilitation stay through their insurance. So it does come into play. It comes into play acknowledging that we have CCRC campuses, and we will use that insurance in every way we can. But your monthly rent is still going to be considered private pay or an out-of-pocket cost that your insurance isn't going to touch.
Well, thank you for clarifying that for our listeners, Melissa. Another thing I think you might be able to help with some clarification on is the term ADL. We had some listeners write in asking what that means, what that stands for, how that plays into the type of care that their loved one might need. So can you just explain what ADLs are and how that kind of fits into the care offered at a senior living community?
Yes, back to the acronyms. That is,
we love the acronyms in our industry, clearly.
Oh, I'm so guilty. I wish I could give a guide to the family so they feel comfortable with our language. ADL stands for Activity of Daily Living. And if you broke down your loved one's day from the moment that they get up to the moment they go to bed, and then sandwich everything in between, those are all their activities of daily living. So what time they get up, how they get out of bed, what their routine looks like. Do they have breakfast first, or do they go to the bathroom first? Are they safe to do that motion of events when they get up? Meal preparation, their mobility is considered an activity of daily living. How they navigate around their space. Is it independently on their own 2 feet? Does it include an assistive device like a cane, walker, or rollator? So those are the activities of daily living we're looking for. And it can be broken down even to, their medication routine. That's part of their day. It can be broken down into preparing meals, right? Do they fully still cook breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or have they substituted the, topic of cooking with easy fast food to-go meals or microwavable meals? And why is that? Do they prefer that, or do they just no longer have the ability to make a home cooked, nutritious meal. So again, anything from the moment your loved one wakes up to the moment they go to bed and how they do that is considered an activity of daily living.
All right. And then our next question was in regards to home health and adult day options. So this listener was kind of wondering what the difference is between that and moving to a senior living community as far as the amount of care that's offered, if care can be offered around the clock. So Melissa, do you have any advice for them as far as what option might be the best and what the differences are between them?
So yeah, the difference between adult daycare and a full-time, residence at one of our communities is going to be extremely different. Adult day programs are, I would say, harder to find. They're not robust. And you want to make sure that you're finding a good one that has a good reputation, just like any community, because the essence is you're, dropping off your loved one for a set period of time. So with a set drop off and a set pickup, and there's usually a daily rate, a cost that comes with that. Whereas if your loved one was truly submerged in the community, they have more likelihood to build friendships and build a routine. We see a lot of folks that, have used adult daycare as an intervention to cover something else they needed to do. It's a one-off situation that's really supportive. But living at a community is this 24/7 Encompass support. It's 24/7. It's around the clock, whereas adult daycare is going to be just a set amount of time. So I'd say that is a great option, but if you're going beyond that hourly type service, it's definitely time to look at a community that can be more full service.
Absolutely. So Sam, my last question is going to go to you. This person wrote in that they are interested in volunteering with the Resource Center, and they wanted to know what volunteer options are available and who they should connect with to get started.
We would love to have more volunteers across the state. So if anyone is interested, they should call our 877 number and call us and talk to us about the volunteer opportunities. Really, someone can do whatever they choose or are able to. If they want to, do well checks, make phone calls, or we have some volunteers that help take clients to medical appointments, or offer other transportation, or help with yard work, or just do visits. There's so many options. And definitely we could not do what we do without our volunteers. So I would definitely encourage, and we'd be very excited to have more volunteers located across the state.
Just as a reminder for our listeners, we will have the Resource Center phone number in the description for this episode. So go ahead and call that number if you have questions about volunteering or would like to get signed up. All right. So before we close out today, I wanted to go around. Are there any common questions that you get that you think would be beneficial to share with our listeners?
I was just thinking, listening to Sam, how much, and Melissa brought it up a little bit too, how we coordinate things on our campus. Maybe mom's in independent living, but there's a need there. I can reach out to Samantha Loy. She's going to call the family. What resources can we help mom get on campus? I think that is very important to mention that, because yes, our resource center does a lot of things across the state, but amazing things on our campuses as well.
Thank you, Michelle. And yes, some common things are like help getting orders for therapy, or if someone wants a personal emergency response system, the fall pendant, we can help make referrals and coordinate that, or coordinate private duty home care, in-home care. So as Michelle was mentioning, whether that's help on our campuses or in their own homes, is our common things that we do.
Very important.
I think one of the situations that comes to me, whether it's pertinent in the move-in process or not, and then I kind of rely on Michelle and Samantha at the Resource Center is, there's some tough conversations that come along with considering moving to a retirement community. And most recently, I was helping a family, have talking points to the conversation about driving and safety concerns. Mm-hmm. So we really do get that conversation sometimes on the front end, but more often the three of us are working together with the family after someone moves in and they're realizing, family wise, maybe it's no longer safe that mom or dad is driving, and how do we present other transportation options to them so that they can also see and hopefully make their own decision that, driving isn't a necessity, or could we take a season off from driving? It's ideal time. We're having those conversations now as we head into the winter months. But I think we do get that conversation and question a lot. It's more often from families. But it's something that the three of us work together to try to provide a nice, intervention that everyone's in agreement with, or just bring up the conversation. Yeah.
Right. That's a hard conversation for them to have with mom or dad. Mm-hmm. And I've had families reach out to me, can you help? We are supporting this, but I can't do it. And I've met with the community member, and sometimes it takes that burden off of the family to have us go and talk to the member about the driving.
Yeah, that's probably one of the most common ones we're seeing right now with the time of year too. Mm-hmm. It's an ideal conversation to be having right now. So it's definitely upticking in the conversations we're having with families.
Well, I want to thank you all again for joining me today. You shared some incredibly helpful information and answered all the questions that our listeners have been writing in about and wanted to know. For those listening, please be sure to like and subscribe to the Senior Living Today podcast so that you never miss a new episode. As we mentioned, we are wrapping up our season today, but please be on the lookout for some bonus episodes as we prepare for our next season. And happy holidays to everyone listening, and we will see you after the new year.